I want to talk about why I left working in rehab to focus on my own private practice. Look, when I first qualified as a counsellor and went out into the big wide world, I wanted to get some experience in the addiction industry, and one of the most obvious places to do that was working in rehab. And I wanted to get experience working in a few different places to build up my understanding of the industry and what was going on. So I emailed a local rehab near me and I spoke to this lovely lady, and she invited me in for an interview and said, look, you are a good fit, but to be honest, you don't have any other experience, any other rehabs, so we're not going to give you a job at this time. And I was really disappointed and super sad. But then a few weeks later, or like a day later, I called her back up and I said, look, what would you do if you were me? How would you get a job in a rehab if you were me? And she said, look, Luke, what I would do is I would go and work in a free rehab in a charity or something, get the experience, and I'd apply for some paid jobs. So that's exactly what I did. I literally Googled around, found some free rehabs and charities in London, and I travelled all the way to London for like an hour and a half every single day to work in one of the rehabs and got that experience and learned from some amazing counsellors who were really awesome, and was like a junior counsellor basically working there for free, helping them with the clients and counselling clients. And then literally 6 months later, I called up that first rehab and I said to the manager, it's the same lady answered, I said, look, I did exactly what you said. I went and got experience with this other rehab. Now can I have a job? And to be honest, she didn't really have a leg to stand on. That's exactly what she told me to do 6 months ago. So she was like, yeah, sure, Luke, of course you can have a job. So she gave me a job as a counsellor there. And that gave me really good experience on the free side of rehabs, of charities, of clients who had just come out of prison and who were looking to be rehabilitated. Then on the other side of the paid rehab, of people who paid 20k plus to go in a 28-day residential rehab treatment. So I got a wealth of experience in those both places. But I want to talk about why I kind of left that industry or left those places in order to grow my own private practice. One of the main reasons I didn't fully agree with private rehab is that because the cost can be anywhere from £10,000 to £20,000 on average, to anywhere higher up to hundreds of thousands of pounds if you go into like a really fancy one in Switzerland. But the standard cost is like 5k a week, and if you're there for 4 weeks, then that's going to be 20k roughly. And I saw clients who just didn't have the money to pay for that, but they were in such a desperate and vulnerable situation. They would get like all their family members to chip in to get the 20 grand together. Or sometimes they would split it across credit cards and put it on all these different credit cards. And the rehab were just happy to take all of that money, which is very, very questionable. And the person would then go into rehab, they'd be there for 28 days, and then they would come out and they would relapse. And then they would have all that money on the credit card, all the extra pressure on the strain of the family from paying all of that money to be in there, only to be relapsing and be back in the same situation. So rehab is oftentimes just not really affordable for most people because they don't need to pay all of that money and have 28 days out of their life in order to make the change. So it's just a very, very high cost. And what you get for that cost isn't necessarily always worth it. So the type of support you get in rehab is typically group therapy. So you're going to sit in a group with a bunch of people. They're all going to be at different stages of recovery. So one may be their 27th day in rehab and they're just leaving and they haven't drunk or done drugs for 27 days. They're all good. Then one person may be their first day and they're detoxing. They can barely keep their eyes open or function. And you may be struggling with all of those different people in a group. And also there may be 3 people in the group one week because not all the beds are sold. Then next week there may be 20 people in a group and your whole group has changed, your whole dynamic has changed. Different people are coming in, speaking, having different needs. So it can be very hard in that group dynamic to get your needs met, as well as different substances. One person may be drinking all the time, one person may be doing crack or heroin, one person may be doing cocaine or ketamine, and you've got all those people thrown in a group trying to manage them all and sort them all out, which I've ran many, many groups in rehab in my time, and it is possible, but it's definitely challenging when everyone's at a different stage. And no one really gets much one-to-one support. Like if you're lucky, you may get 1 hour a week of therapy one-to-one. So if you're there for 4 weeks, that's going to be 4 sessions of therapy with that counsellor. And to be honest, that's not going to really do much, right? That one-to-one support isn't going to really help people. And also one thing that I really disagreed with some of the rehabs I was at is that they actually decided to fire all of the counsellors and lay us all off and just have recovery workers there. So they're doing a recovery work and a counsellor. So a counsellor is trained in the psychology, has a degree in counselling, training in counselling. A recovery worker is just someone who's been through recovery themselves and just works there as an employee who's like just supporting the clients, but they don't really have any training. So they literally fired all the counsellors and ran the therapy groups with just the recovery workers. So people were literally paying £20,000 just to have peer support in a group by not even having a trained professional, which to me blew my mind and was unbelievable. You're basically paying for a fancy hotel to stay in for 28 days to have 12-step AA meetings you can go to for free. That just blew my mind that they were charging people to do that. It was just insane. The next thing in terms of the AA, so a lot of the rehabs are 12-step based from my experience and a lot of the ones I've seen out there, and that basically means that in those groups you'll be working through the steps. And normally the clients I worked with, they would go through step 1, 2 and 3 in the rehab while they were there for 4 weeks. And think about it, you're going through the 12 steps, which is spiritual. Loads of people don't like it. Loads of people have already tried AA and 12 steps. You're paying £20,000 to then go into rehab to learn the same stuff you can get for free on the outside, which just blew my mind. People don't even like the 12 steps, yet you're taking people through the 12 steps after charging them £20,000. Doesn't make any sense. You can just go to meetings on the outside. And loads of people or loads of rehabs do recommend you just go to meetings and do 90 and 90, after you get out of the rehab. So it just like negates the point for rehab. Why are you paying all that money to go there? It just started to blow my mind the more I understood it. And as a therapist in that environment, of course, I did my best to work with the clients and support them through it. But it just became a model. The longer I was there, the more it kind of ate away at me and the more I kind of saw all these different things I disagreed with about it. And look, rehab can be good for some people. Clients who are dependent on alcohol or some kind of drug and need a physical detox can be really helpful to have a 2-week detox in rehab, to have that 24-hour care and 24-hour support to be supported to detox your body from all those drugs and toxins. That can be helpful. But also, I didn't want to work with people who just had hit rock bottom, who were in that place, because there's so many people in the world who have a problem with drink who aren't at that level. The way I break it down is like on a continuum. So on one side you have a dependent drinker and they're drinking every single day, typically like a litre of bottle of vodka a day. They're physically dependent on alcohol. Then you have a daily drinker, and this is someone who drinks every single day, but not the volume of a dependent drinker. So that may be a bottle of wine a night, for example. And then you have like a weekend drinker. So this is someone who drinks every single week, but not every single day. So that may be partying or at the weekends or a night or just kind of like 3 or 4 times in the week, something like that. So they have a problem with drink, but they're not dependent or they're not daily drinking. And sometimes these people can be involved with drugs as well, going out the weekend, doing a bit of cocaine, that kind of stuff. Then you have a binge drinker, which is the final one, which is someone who may not drink for a few weeks or months, but then when they do drink, they go absolutely bonkers. It can be like a multiple day binge or drinking and cocaine and drugs, and they can just really kind of hit the bottle really hard and go completely bonkers, drink in the morning. But then after those few days, they're kind of back to normal and they swear off it for a few weeks, and then the cycle repeats itself. So they're the typical type of drinkers that I've come across over my career and that I see all the time. Now, rehab helps the dependent drinkers, the people who are drinking the litre bottle of vodka a day, who are dependent on alcohol. But for the daily, weekend and binge drinkers, they don't really need that level of support. They don't really need to wait until they hit rock bottom after 10 years of drinking at an unhealthy level until they're doing it every day in order to get help. So I like in private practice and in my counselling, we don't work with clients who are dependent drinkers. We work with clients who are all the others, who are daily, weekend and binge drinkers. And that's where we primarily help those people before they get to rock bottom. And that's why it's important for me to leave rehab to help people before it actually got to the point where they even are that bad. Also, once you leave rehab, there's no real kind of integration into your life, right? And that's the challenging thing. You get to the 28 days, of course you didn't drink or do drugs because you're in that rehab bubble. But then when you get out, you're back to your normal life, the same triggers, the same friends inviting you to the pub, the same work stress, the same all of that stuff, plus the stress of spending 20k on something and the pressure of making that work, and your family or putting on credit cards or wherever you got the money together. There's that whole side of it as well. and you've got to deal with that without going back to the same old behaviour of using drink and drugs. And there's no real aftercare with the rehabs. Maybe it's like 1 hour meeting, group meeting again, another group meeting, but 1 hour group meeting a week that you get of aftercare that you can pop into, pop out of. It's entirely up to you. And that's just not enough support to help people really make that change in their lives. Whereas with the addiction counselling and one-to-one counselling that I help clients with now and that I moved more over to is about having that integration support. So we analyse what are your triggers in the here and now, how are you going to handle them, how are you going to overcome them, what are you dealing with, and actually make that change with addiction in your life, which is what I did. I was struggling with drink and drugs. I had one-on-one therapy and slowly over the months integrated it into my life and changed my life around being sober, and that's what really stuck for me. It wasn't that kind of bubble rehab yo-yo kind of whiplash effect of what happens when you're in rehab. It was that slowly integrating the change into your life, which is why one-to-one counselling can be really effective, because it teaches you to do that, to change it when the real triggers happen. What happens when you have a stressful day at work? How do you deal with that stuff? And that's what I go over with my clients. So in terms of what I do now and what that focus on my private practice has led to, is now I work one-on-one with clients who are, like I mentioned earlier, more problem drinkers and functional alcoholics rather than complete alcoholics who need to have a medical detox. And we work through an 8-week addiction counselling program that helps them integrate that change into their life. With me and the rest of the counsellors on the team, we work with clients to do that. And that's why I much prefer now what I've moved into rather than some of the challenges I've spoken about in this video when it comes to rehab specifically. So if you want to find out more about working with me and having some one-on-one therapy, I want to invite you to have a no obligation, confidential one-on-one call with me. So click the link below in the description and book your call directly in my calendar, and I look forward to talking to you soon.